Okay, we're looking at about 2 after noon. We are going to kick off our Leadership for Women presentation. I'm going to pass it over to Raw. They can answer, I guess, introduce themselves and get on with the presentation. So thank you, Raw.
And thank you, Lindsay. Welcome, everyone, to Leadership for Women, brought to you on behalf of your Anthem Employee Assistance Program. My name, as was stated, is Ra Kalan. My pronouns are they and she, and I'm an emotional intelligence consultant, emotional health coach, and I hold a master's degree in clinical counseling. And all those titles simply mean is that I'm here to come and help you people more effectively, especially for those who identify as women in the professional realm. And in this conversation, we're going to need to use the word people as a verb because maybe you've noticed peopling can be pretty difficult, especially when there are glass ceilings, there are biases, there's imposter syndrome haunting us left and right. So we really have to work to utilize our emotional intelligence, our self-awareness to overcome these blockages, these obstacles, some of which are internal, as well as so that we can gather together using our social skills, using our communities, using our storytelling to explain what we're up against so that we can overcome these external barriers as well. So in today's conversation, I want to invite you to ask questions as we go over facts and issues on a global perspective, as well as looking at those challenges that women face and the trends that contribute to that. We'll also be looking at our capabilities, doing a self-assessment because we love a deep dive into self-awareness here. And then we'll look at key attributes for women leaders to really take pride in themselves for. We'll look at those recipes for success, and then we'll look at creating an action plan with the gems that you want to implement after today's conversation. And you'll notice I keep saying conversation. This is not a lecture. I'll be asking you questions here and there, and I want you to feel welcome to ask questions via the chat box as well, so that we can make sure that this information is not generic, but that it is truly applicable to you. Okay? So by the time we are wrapping up today, we will complete this training and you'll be able to explain more of the realities that women face in the workplace. And the irony here is you probably already know the realities that you as women face in the workplace. For those who are our male counterparts who are here as allies, you'll get to learn a lot more and you'll be able to articulate more fluidly as an ally what women can be up against. We'll describe how the key attributes women exhibit can be an asset in leadership. It's often looked at as a liability, but being aware of how to connect with others, being very much in a community mindset, these are key strengths that women have and key strengths that leaders need. And we'll look at employing what you have learned to become a more confident and competent leader. Confidence being how you feel about yourself, competence being how you feel about what you're capable of doing. So let's address both of those. So before we move forward into a future that is beautifully female, let's look backwards and understand how inspiring women in history have carved out room for the what was once known to be impossible to become possible. You've got our different heroines, such as Joan of Arc throughout history. We've got American mathematicians for NASA. We've got those campaigning and fighting for equality, as well as we have movie stars and instrumental pioneers in science. We have the first Black women to create historically Black college and universities. And this is where we come from. So we're talking about overcoming race in so many instances, overcoming equality issues, being the first in some of these fields. And in this medical profession, it is so predominantly a boys' game, a man's world. And yet, without the touch of women, without the innovative thinking, without the support, we would not be where we are today. So looking backwards gives us a chance to appreciate all the different women role models we've had that probably heard a lot of, you can't do that, or there aren't any women doing that, or that's a man's job. And even though they heard those statements, they did not internalize them. They heard them. And not only did they hear those comments from men, they heard those comments from other women. Some of these women listed here heard those very comments from their own mothers, from the women who they looked up to in their life who wanted to protect them from being disappointed. wanted to protect them from putting themselves in a position where they could be isolated or not receive the opportunities that were more common for women because they were reaching for opportunities that were supposed to just be separated from men. So moving into the present today, we have all types of different representation. We have different women who are stepping forward, those who are moving into fields of science, those who are moving greater into fields of art, greater into fields of sustainable living. So based off of this list, are there any women, and it can be women in your personal life, and it can be women who you look up to who are in the world around you who maybe you've never met before. Are there any women who are missing from this list, who have made big, big leaps in history, or who are making a big impact today? Feel free to drop your suggestions in the chat box so that each of us can learn about more women we need to highlight and appreciate their efforts for. We got Angela Merkel, we've got Christine, we've got Maria. Who are people who you know? And if you're finding it difficult to think of people who you know, not just people, women who you know, take heed to that. Why is it difficult for us to start thinking of these role models? Yes, absolutely. They do not have to be living. They do not. Joan of Arc, she has come and gone, but she has still left a legacy for herself, hasn't she? Mother Teresa, Simone Biles, Nina Simone, Michelle Obama. Absolutely. Now, I want to make sure I pronounce it. Is it Kajat Brown? I'm going to Google this too. I feel like I'm familiar, but I want to make sure. See, this is wonderful. As we start to storytell of the women who have impacted us in major and really meaningful ways, we educate one another. And instead of invalidating or belittling their contributions, come on, Shirley Chisholm, yes, without being able to talk about this, we would not be able to highlight how they made a way where there wasn't one. There was not a beaten path. They decided that they didn't want to be where they were. There was someplace else that they were being guided by an internal North Star to head towards. And each and every one of us have these moments in our life. Maybe we're not going to be Shirley Chisholms, and maybe we're not going to be Angela Merkel's and Michelle Obama's at that high level, but in our own communities, in our own offices, we get this little voice in our head that says, you need to do something different to get something different. I know nobody else is co-signing, but I have a great idea. I have an innovative idea. We need to move on this. And we have to be willing to lean into those moments, no matter what field we're in. Even if we at some point decide to shift fields of focus in our career, we have to be willing to trust that inner voice. Now, the reason why, and we'll talk more about this as we move through our conversation today, it's so difficult to trust that inner voice is because there's also an inner voice that is a big critic of everything we do and is always reminding us of how things could spiral downward, like doom spiral. And we're fearful of consequences of doing something different to get something different. So it's easier to just go along with the way things are. But that is what makes the women who you're listing in the chat and the women on this current slide so powerful. They chose not to do the easy thing. They chose to do an uncomfortable thing, which was to go against the grain, to do something different, to experience and to create change so that the rest of us have the opportunity to choose to do something different. Thank you for your suggestions and for playing along. So let's take a gander at a global perspective, because this isn't just a USA conversation. This is a worldwide conversation, because the future is female, whether you're in the United States or elsewhere. Of course, there are parts of the world where it is safer to say this out loud than others. Let's be very honest about that. However, where you see growth, where you see prosperity, you will find women. You will find women. We are a non-negotiable. We have to be around for these things. So, two terms that have recently been used in reference to women in leadership, right? Breaking the glass ceiling. How many of us are familiar with that, right? Breaking the glass ceiling. So this is implying that while we look up and we see all these amazing possibilities, at a certain point, because we don't see a lot of examples of women moving past a certain level, we become aware that there is a glass ceiling. There is a barrier that even though it doesn't look like it's there, because yes, we are no longer just allocated to be in the home. We're in different fields. We are in the doctor's offices. We are wearing the white coats. We are the ones responsible for these big opportunities. There's still a certain level that we're not easily able to reach, not without advocating for ourselves, not without being able to overly compensate for the fact that we are women and being able to demonstrate our competence, right? So breaking the glass ceiling really is pointing to, even though this is kind of an unspoken barrier in so many different rooms, especially in rooms where men are the majority, there is still going to be a need to break through, to meet yourself on the other side of this glass barrier that keeps you from being able to get to the levels you desire. And then we can look at another statement that is not as frequently heard, but it is becoming more popular, the motherhood penalty. And this is referring to worldwide how women are not expected to necessarily be able to do it all. You know, people tell you, maybe don't multitask. So the idea that a woman would think that she can have a family and breastfeed and take care of that family and also be a wonderful professional, a instrumental team member in her career, those things are side-eyed. People are suspicious of that. It's like, be one or the other. When you're trying to be both, you're expected to be penalized. Either penalized because your family is missing you and there are things slipping through the cracks at home, or penalized because at work you can't be completely devoted because you are always going to be on standby as a mama bear. So when we acknowledge this, we're also acknowledging that the way that our business structures have been designed up until this point has not made room for women to be able to step in and to be able to balance all these different hats, juggle all these different balls that we keep in the air. It very much has been designed so that those who identify as men, who are typically historically seen as the breadwinners, seen as not the parent who needs to be home all the time, can do their business and move forward. But now things are going to need to shift and adjust because men are not the only ones who are handling their business outside of the home. And now, because women are handling their business outside and inside, we have to make the adjustments, the accommodations, and we need to assimilate the information into our previous belief system so that we don't feel so much guilt and so that we allow ourselves to strive for new possibilities. So growth in women-owned businesses has outpaced the overall increase in new businesses by 1.5 times as many businesses which were started previously are now being outpaced by those who are women entrepreneurs, women business owners. And globally, women hold 24% of senior leadership positions. So the US itself lags behind the global average at about 21%. And China is really getting ahead of the game with 51% of senior leadership slots being held by women. This is once again demonstrating how if you are willing to be an innovative thinker and do something different, you can reap the rewards. Now, it doesn't mean that it doesn't come with some risks, but we have to take some healthy risks to get to a new normal. And this new normal allows the motherhood penalty to be removed. This new normal allows us to break through that glass ceiling and to see how working together, hand in hand, gender by gender, non-binary, male, female, everybody can get us to a better state economically than where we're at currently. So we have to recognize that a lot of times it's difficult to advocate for change because we will only focus on what we will lose. We are only focusing on what the harm could be, what the obstacle is. But in order to really work with change, we have to recognize what we can gain as well. What is possible? What could be taken off other people's plates who are experiencing chronic stress and burnout so that we can all have a more healthy lifestyle because we are relying on each other, trusting each other, opening up doors for one another in a new way. So once again, we're talking about women in leadership, but we need male allies to help make a lot of this possible. And we also need to take away any competitive nature between women in the sense that we need to help each other up. Instead of being like crabs in a bucket and seeing one another as so much competition that we badmouth or we don't recommend one another, We don't refer one another because we want to make sure there's enough left for us. That mentality has to be thrown out with the motherhood penalty and the breaking of the glass ceiling. We really need to get to a place where, yes, it's healthy to have competition once we have both gotten to where we need to be. But I need to help you up so that we can both work to break this glass ceiling together. So, top issues as it pertains to women in our professional atmosphere. There are many contributions and many ways that there is a lack of women in senior levels of leadership. Lots of research brings this about to cultural biases against women. We're seen as nurturers predominantly, not necessarily as leaders. We are seen as gatherers in our communities, not necessarily hunters who go out and get it. But you tell me a woman who, if her family is threatened, she ain't a hunter. You tell me a woman who has not been willing to really lead a situation to steer her family, her community away from harm's way. Now, I know these women, and you do too. Some of them you might have thought of in the earlier activity where we were listing women in the past and in the present who are noteworthy. And some of them are names that we still haven't even spoken of yet. But recognizing that these assumptions over what role women can play, you're right, we can nurture, but not all of us are built specifically to focus in that area. Many of us are, but not all of us. So we got to overcome these cultural biases that say things like a woman's place is in the house, a woman's place is in the kitchen. Why is anyone telling us where our place is at this point? That is something that we get to decide that gets to come internally, outwardly. And the beautiful thing is there are going to be plenty of us who decide my place is in the home, my place is in the kitchen. And there will be others of us who get to decide my place is in outer space. My place is 50,000 leagues underneath the sea. My place is in labs. My place are in hospitals. My place is where I feel led to serve. And you'll get the best out of me when I get to choose where I'm led to serve. But if I'm forced to be somewhere, there's so much missed opportunity. And we'll start to discover that in ourselves. So much missed opportunity when we don't get to decide where we feel led to serve. So lots of research has shown that unconscious biases, those biases that we are not aware of, because of course there are the covert biases and then the overt biases. There are things that you have preferences towards that you know that you have preferences towards, and then there are things that you aren't even consciously aware that you have a preference or a judgment against. When we're talking about unconscious bias, we're talking about those things you are not consciously aware that you have a preference or a prejudice against. So studies are showing that unconscious bias plays a significant role in hiring and promotion decisions. And not just of men hiring women, but sometimes of women hiring other women as well, which also contributes to the lower number of women in key positions. And this is why we come back and highlight, how are women able to help one another up? We need allyship as well, but how can we start to make ways possible for one another? Only 1 in 5 senior leaders is a woman, and just 1 in 25 is a woman of color. So we've addressed race briefly, we've touched on it lightly, but when we start looking at how there are so many more funnels that limit us, the more we get closer to women of darker complexions, women of color in general, we start to see where this inequity, this lack of equality, and this struggle really is coming from. And if we start looking at even what we are compensated for, our knowledge, for our skill set, for our solution-oriented abilities, we start looking at pay inequity. Women tending to have a higher level of education and yet being paid 23% less than men, like 60% college educated. I don't know about you, but that was a lot of sleepless nights. Collecting a master's degree was not an easy thing. And for those of you on this call who have gone even above in your education levels, you know that it came with sweat, it came with tears, it came with a lot of perseverance. And someone's going to tell you that you don't deserve to make as much as a man in the same position, who might not even have the same level of education, who might not have had as many sleepless nights, as much sweat go into this as you have. This isn't about becoming an angry woman. This is about becoming an empowered woman. This is about being willing to call a thing and acknowledge when things are inequitable and acknowledge when things don't make sense and the math is not mathing. because you went to school, ladies, and you're educated. So when it doesn't make sense, don't try to force it to. Instead, be willing, once again, to do something different, to get something different. And that means learning the balance between being assertive and being aggressive. And because of this, that's why they call it the assertive versus aggressive dilemma. When a woman steps into a room and will not let someone speak over her, asserts herself regularly, will be open and comfortable disagreeing with others' opinions, even when it would be easier to just nod and smile and go along with it, she can be deemed aggressive. Doesn't mean that she actually was by the term of what aggression is defined as. Being assertive is just being willing to recognize the people who I'm working with and speaking with, my colleagues, my peers, they have their own rights to expression. But being assertive means so do I. It means I need to give people space to be heard, and I also need to be willing to take up space and be heard. It's that willingness to take up space and be heard part that often gives people this blurred line effect to aggression, because a woman's place is to often be seen and not heard. But we've heard that term used towards children as well, and I assure you, we're not children. So we have a right to be heard. We have a right to vocalize, to agree, to disagree. We have a right to speak up about these things. And this isn't a new concept, but sometimes you need someone to remind you, because you'll be the one in the meeting. You'll be the one in the conversation where you know that you've been interrupted the past 3 times you've tried to speak in a 5-minute conversation. And you have to decide, am I going to let this slide because I want to be seen as easy to work with? Or do I want to let them know I have thoughts and ideas? And it is actually quite rude every time I try to share them for you to interrupt. I need you to understand that respect goes both ways. I'm not going to disrespect you, but you're not going to disrespect me either. And this is what makes women like Michelle Obama and the other really, really powerful houses of women that we saw in previous slides so special. You think Michelle Obama's cussing anybody out? I mean, maybe in her personal time when she's out way of the cameras, but do you think that that's how she handles things? No. When she is leading in front of folks, she can very clearly tell you what she is and isn't going to deal with. But she doesn't have to disrespect herself or you in the process. If anything, she calls you in while she tells you what will and will not fly. We have to learn the balance here. We have to learn the balance of being willing to make people uncomfortable when we are assertive, being willing to let people misunderstand our assertive nature and let them think that it's aggression. But once they start to really listen, like actively listen to what we're contributing, they'll realize that we're not coming for them just to come for them. We're not trying to be heard just to hear ourselves speak and talk. We're wanting to contribute so that we can move our field forward. We're wanting to contribute so that we can make a difference. So I want to check in with you because I know being a part of the medical field has its own realm of difficulties, has its own realm of top issues. Are any of the things we're talking about so far addressing what you've been experiencing as well? And I got my eye on the chat box, of course. I got to make sure, I got to make sure because I want to ensure that as we talk about this, like we said in the beginning, this is applicable to you. And if there are specific areas, phrases, maybe imposter syndrome that we need to dive deeper into, this is why this is not a lecture, and this is why this is a conversation. So go ahead and make sure you ask your questions where you have them. And make sure that you also are willing to share your insight because we each need to be willing to teach one another and pay it forward. I see in the chat, I find it hard sometimes because people can't get past the aggressiveness of the communication to hear what you are saying when it is simply assertive communication. Absolutely. And that's part of our conditioning, isn't it? Even some of us as women, if a woman comes on too strong, we'll start to roll our eyes like, ugh, aggressive much? And it's like, no, did you hear the quality of what she said? Did you hear the quality of the content? I understand that maybe your feelings are a little hurt because she was willing to cut you off just to make sure that you understood it wasn't appropriate to have cut her off. I understand that. I understand. But were you able to really listen into what was happening? And when people are able to practice active listening, which is a skill that is foundational in social skills within emotional intelligence, people are able to be so much more effective at understanding one another. Instead of taking things so personally, you also have an opportunity to internalize new perspectives in a way that can serve you. I see in the chat, this list of top issues is very familiar. Absolutely, the guilt and imposter syndrome is real. I also see I worry also is being seen as difficult by leadership when trying to advocate for things like resources and compensation. Absolutely. But this is the wild thing. Our male counterparts advocate, and they're not so worried about being seen as difficult. We're concerned about being seen as difficult because of our conditioning over what makes us worthy and what makes us valuable as women. We're often seen as comfort. So when we are willing to make people uncomfortable for the sake of the greater good of a mission that we're working through, it confuses folks, right? It's like, no, you're a woman and you're supposed to make me feel at ease. You're supposed to make me feel comfortable. You're doing the opposite. You're making me feel intimidated because that was an idea that I should have thought of. Or you're making me feel challenged. And nobody likes to necessarily feel challenged, especially by someone who they assume they shouldn't feel challenged by. That starts to mess with their ego, starts to mess with their psyche. And I'm talking about all genders and how we respond to women who assert themselves, not just men. I have seen other women get very, very aggressive towards one another when there was a woman who was speaking up in an assertive way, and they just aren't used to it. So they couldn't actually self-regulate to have a conversation in an effective way. They just escalated to aggression because they felt threatened in that moment. And this is why we got to call each other in as women. And this is why we have to call each other in as people. Because if I'm being difficult, could you be curious instead of judgmental for just a moment as to why you're feeling challenged by me? You might not want to hear me talk about the resources and the compensation, but also, would you like to have to replace me? Because I'm so much more than competent at what I do, and it's going to cost you money to have to train someone up to get to the level that I'm at. So you have an option here. You got two choices. You could be willing to hear me out and understand where I'm coming from, or you could miss out on an opportunity to make more with me because I'm here to help you. In the end, we all want to be comfortable, but we have to recognize that in order to get to a place of comfort, we have to be willing to sit through some uncomfortable conversations. And true women in business are aware that there are going to be times that they are standing by themselves. And that's why you got to deeply connect with what you're standing for, so that when you're the only one who is still standing, you're not doubtful of yourself. And that's easier said than done. Please understand, I know that. But this is why we have these conversations, to remind you, sometimes you might be the only one standing. You might have been standing with a team of people, but as it got more difficult, one by one, they started sitting down. But this is why we want more women empowerment, so that even if it is just one of us, another one or two pop up to say, but I'll stand with you. I see what you're advocating for. And I have my own ideas over how we could polish this up. So let's work together so that we can really drive this point home. So we can really get these resources. So we can demonstrate our value so that our compensation does increase, right? So I'm right there with y'all. So let's look at some of these challenges, which we already are kind of addressing that we can relate to, right? How about being treated equally? Being treated equally. So being heard for the quality and the content of what you're sharing, and not being dismissed because of how passionate you are when you're sharing it. Now, are there times that there are women in leadership who would do well to do some emotional intelligence courses to learn a little bit more about communication? Absolutely. We all could learn. But there's a lot more stacked against women who might not be as emotionally intelligent as there is against men who might not be as emotionally intelligent. Something about we don't expect for them to be so emotionally in tune, but we expect for women to be. So that's a level of inequality there. How about garnering support from other women? Instead of that crabs in a bucket syndrome where when we see someone making it, we get intimidated and we try to pull them back down, can we not get beneath her and push her up so that when she gets up there, she can reach down and pull us up too? How about being confident? And how about not feeling bad for feeling confident? How about not being told that you're arrogant or that you are stuck up? How about you know your stuff and you know your stuff? And part of knowing your stuff is knowing that there's a realm of things you don't know yet and being humble about that, but really recognizing to own what you do know and to be unapologetic about that. How about speaking up and not being worried as being seen as difficult or too mouthy or too vocal? It's like, if I'm speaking up on behalf of a company we're all a part of, and I'm speaking up because I see liabilities, I see threats, I see opportunities that we're not taking advantage of. Why are we acting like I'm working against anybody? I'm trying to work with you. I'm trying to work for us. But if you're not willing to help me, now it makes it look like I'm working against you. How about building alliances with other decision makers or becoming a member of the C-suite? We really want to move the needle forward in so many ways where women can feel more confident in positions of power. But that also means being willing to advocate for why we should be in that position. Even if we're going to be the only woman, even if we're going to be the only woman of color, even if we're going to be the only, even if, and being willing to put ourselves in those positions. Once again, it's uncomfortable. But sometimes being uncomfortable is worth it. It does not mean every time you're uncomfortable that you are unsafe. I'm going to say that again because each of us, we are pain avoidant as human beings, as people. We don't want to hurt. But not every time you're uncomfortable are you unsafe. And you have to be uncomfortable in order to move past the comfort zone, in order to get to the things that are actually the spice of life, the things that matter most to us. So I just highlight that because a lot of times we back off of situations because we're uncomfortable. But just check in to see if this discomfort is because I'm doing something new and I have to get adjusted to doing something new, or if this discomfort is letting me know, no, I'm not safe here. Like I am emotionally, psychologically, or physically in danger. And in the world we live in, women, we got to trust our gut on that. Even if nobody else sees what you see or feels what you feel, you have to be able and willing to trust your gut on that. We could look at asking for money, asking for appropriate compensation to match our skill level and our education level. We could look at speaking on accomplishments and not being seen once again as arrogant when we speak up about what we have acquired knowledge-wise, what we have accomplished. We also, a major challenge is overcoming perfectionism. This thought that if I'm going to put something out, it has to be perfect or else it's not good enough to be seen by others. If we spend all our time trying to make something perfect, we won't put anything out. Now, there's nothing wrong with having standards. There's nothing wrong with having a certain expectation of how you're going to operate. Absolutely. However, perfectionism can stop so many innovative ideas in their tracks. Nobody even gets to find out about them because we could never get them just right. So if you are a perfectionist and I'm speaking to you, you don't necessarily need your work to be perfect. You need your work to be purposeful. You need to be able to explain the why behind what you are putting energy into. And being able to explain the why doesn't mean that you have all the answers, but it means that you are very well versed and very clear on the needs that what you're working on can meet. And if you can directly talk about how what you are advocating for is going to meet a need, is going to hit the bottom line, people perk up and they start listening because money talks. Regardless of the gender it's coming from, people listen when money talks. It's just sometimes we have to break through some unconscious biases, some barriers, some glass ceilings so that people can really hear us, right? So trust your gut, listen to yourself, and be open to listening to one another. So trends that we're seeing. There are more women leaders expected in the future. And guess what? They are wanted. We're starting to see, and we'll take a look in the next couple of slides of the key attributes that women are knocking it out of the park with. And this is why they are taking up more leadership space. These roles are getting harder and more complicated every day. And that's why seeing women rise to the occasion is so beautiful. Yes, the complexities in our office spaces and our work dynamics in remote work versus working in person, working in certain fields, all of this is getting more technical. And yet we're seeing that as women leaders start to evolve, they're able to meet that challenge. Expectations is that you will do good for the company and society. You know, people get really upset when it seems like women are interested in doing good for themselves. You notice that, like, if something's good for you, It's frowned upon, even by yourself. If something's only good for you, you feel the need to make excuses over, well, I want to make this much so that I can take care of X, Y, and Z, or so that I can donate, or so that I can. How about I want to make this much because I'm worth this much? How about that? How about that's the end of the conversation? How about, yes, it is wonderful to pay it forward. How about, yes, it is amazing to be heart-led in the work that we do. But how about also we are valid and worthy of wanting to appreciate, be appreciated, and be compensated for what we are actually contributing. There's nothing wrong in that. But our conditioning would tell us that's selfish. It's not. It's called self-preservation. So this is why we want to be mindful of having the expectation. Yeah. Do we want to do good for others? Absolutely. But there's nothing wrong with wanting to do good for ourselves. I see in the chat, do you see a lot of glass cliff happening with the increase in women in leadership? You can, and we'll talk about that in a moment too, because there's this movement of opt-in, and then there's the movement of opt-out. And it's all about whether you feel like going with the flow of how your career field is evolving, or if you are willing to change the trajectory of your career to do something different. So when we talk about the glass cliff, it's not necessarily the ceiling where you're trying to break through. It's kind of like you're working, and then you fall off, essentially. So I do see a lot of that, but I think because we're seeing more women leaders, we're learning from one another's experiences with the glass cliff, and we're auto-correcting as we need to. So when we talk about women are rated better than men on key leadership capabilities, this is not to rub it in anybody's face, but this is just to point out once again that a thing is a thing. Call it what it is, ladies. So taking initiative, higher percentile. Resilience, being willing to take a setback and turn it into a comeback. That's what resilience is, right? Higher percentile. Practicing self-development. So having an interest in sitting in conversations like this and not just having it wash over you, but taking in the gems that you need to and implementing it. Self-development, higher percentile. And to me, that falls right up there with taking initiative. Maybe driving for results. You want outcomes. I was actually quite surprised, I can admit, that I saw such a gap in the difference in these percentiles between men and women. We could look at displaying high integrity and honesty, wanting to be transparent in order to get to the greatest good of all, right? We could look at developing others. Women are community-based creatures, just like people are community-based creatures. But because of our conditioning and our wiring, let me nerd out with you real quick. One of my favorite things that I learned when I was in grad school, my professor taught me how before puberty, boys and girls are very much the same. They're curious. They're learning about themselves. They're learning about life. They're learning about their family, and they're very egocentric. But when puberty strikes, women in our wiring go in this direction of, who are my friends? What do my parents do for a living? Who do I have a crush on? What team am I going to join? But our male counterparts go deeper into a more egocentric mindset over, what am I good at? What am I capable of? What do I want to accomplish? So when we talk about developing others, women often have more of a village mentality, and that's what makes us higher rating in this percentile of this capability. We are interested in what's going on in the other parts of our community to see how we can bring it together as a whole. Inspiring and motivating others because we want to win together, ideally. Now, we have also gotten into this mindset of crabs in a bucket as well. But that's why learning from one another and not allowing the glass cliff situation to just be meaningless, but to learn from one another's experiences so we can motivate and inspire one another through the mishaps and the lessons we had to learn individually can be such a game changer. Bold leadership, higher percentile. Building relationships, higher percentile. Interpersonal dynamics, that awareness that a lot of women, not all, because we can't speak in blanket statements here, a lot of women have a more nurturing demeanor, have stronger interpersonal skills. This comes from our conditioning to look after people. So we've learned how to build relationships. We've learned how to work with people more effectively. One, because it's our conditioning, and two, because of survival. When women aren't open to working well with others, this can be really detrimental to us. both professionally as well as to our mental, emotional, and physical health, right? And championing change, being willing to be a change agent. So often, behind many, many great men who have done amazing things for our communities and our fields, there's been a woman who's like, you know that you could, and have you thought about, and have you considered, there's that person in the background. And I'm not saying that behind every great woman, there haven't been amazing support systems as well. I'm just highlighting that championing change, it often comes from this drive and this receptivity that women and those who identify as women have. And the list goes on and on. Establishing stretch goals, being willing to strive towards something. How about collaboration and teamwork or connecting with the outside world? But so that we can continue to be mindful of how we're not necessarily rocking it at everything just yet. We have so much room to grow. When we start getting to the bottom of this list, such as technical or professional expertise, we're not that far behind, but we drop behind in our percentile. And developing strategic perspective, we once again not that far behind, but we've dropped behind a little bit. Now, I'm not worried about that, and you shouldn't be either, because you see how we're knocking it out of the park in these other categories and areas. So now that we're aware that we just need to strengthen these two capabilities, you think anything could stop us? Absolutely not. So this is why we call each other in over, hey, this is where we could improve. Hey, this is where we need support. Hey, this is where we need more training. And once we get it, we can use that for the greatest good. And when we talk about the greatest good, just like we mentioned a moment ago, we are not apart from that. We are a part of our greatest good. We should proudly celebrate being a part of the greatest good so that when we win for the company, we win for us too. When we win for our organizations and our communities, we win for us too. And when we win for us, we have enough overflow that we've won for our communities and our companies as well. So things for employers to think about as we are starting to wind down our time together today. If there are other questions that you have, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat as well. Let's look at how leaders need to take a hard look at what gets in the way of promoting women in the organization. What old modes of thinking, what fixed mindsets instead of growth mindsets are hindering the innovative thinking of women being promoted? It's imperative that organizations change the way they make hiring and promotion decisions and ensure that eligible women are given serious consideration. At the end of the day, we need to ensure that the right person is doing the job. When you put the right person in the right position, talk about flow state. You don't have to worry about them. You don't have to come behind them and clean up. You can just allow them to do their thing because you put the right person in the right position. But if you are making decisions based off appearance, based off aesthetic, and you're not making decisions based off of qualifications and ensuring that there's representation, then we're going to drop the ball and things are going to slip through the cracks like they already are. We want to look at organizations providing more encouragement to women because women have a lot of imposter syndrome. We've talked about it in the chat. We've mentioned it briefly, but this awareness that I feel like I might not be qualified. But do you not realize that there are so many things that our male counterparts are not qualified for, but they put themselves in the running for it anyways, and then they get it and they learn as they go. They are building the plane as they're flying the plane. We can do that too, but that honesty capability that we were looking at a couple slides ago, it keeps us from feeling appropriate in putting ourselves in those positions. It's like, if I don't already know everything I need to know about this, it's not right for me to go out for this. What do you mean? What do you mean? Are you not capable of learning? Have you not learned so much already? Why not give yourself a challenge? Give yourself a chance to rise to the occasion. So leaders can assure that women and their competence are encouraged, and they are encouraged to seek promotions earlier in their careers. There is nothing like a seasoned woman professional coming to another woman and saying, hey, I saw what you did in there. You're lowballing it. You are underestimating what you're capable of. You're not asking for enough. Push for more. Ask for more. Are you going to meet a lot of no's? Absolutely. But are you going to meet a lot of yeses when it's time to? Absolutely. So it's about the right people not missing out on you. There are going to be a lot of rooms where you don't make friends when you advocate for yourself. And when you advocate and encourage for that individual who is the underdog to get that promotion. But there are going to be a lot of rooms that you make the right friends in when you are willing to stand for what you really value. And I hope and trust that in this conversation, you're realizing how imperative it is for you to value yourself. Other people may or may not, but this is why it's our responsibility to demonstrate why they're missing out if they're not valuing us. Not only are they missing out on what we bring to the table, they're missing out on the money we can bring them to. So, answers that experts are giving. Sheryl Sandberg creates the lean in movement, right? So when we talk about lean in, it's saying be willing to advocate, be willing to speak up, lean in. But then there's also the lean out movement. Lean out meaning, you know what? I am not interested in trying to climb the ladder. I don't want to do more. I'm actually content at what I'm doing. And this movement appears because not every woman feels like they want to conquer it all. And that's valid. That's okay too. There's no judgment in that. Do what makes you feel fulfilled. And don't take on more just because everybody else is. But then we have the opting out altogether, which is some women saying, you know what? I don't even want to work anymore. I just want to go home. Let me go home. Now, the truth is that if you go home and you have a family that you're looking after, you're still working. Let's acknowledge that is a full-time job of interpersonal dynamics and all the other things that come with being a caretaker and taking care of a home, and not just taking care of a house, taking care of a home, right? So a lot of studies are showing that those who choose to opt out altogether, they do come back eventually to wanting to work because they are seeking fulfillment for themselves. They're seeking wanting to demonstrate their own capabilities, but that can be a little difficult. Doesn't mean it's not possible, but it can be a little difficult to get up and running again once you've opted out. We want to speak the truth to you here so that you're aware of what your options are and what other women are doing, what other people are doing, so you can figure out where you fit in. Maybe you're a part of the lean out movement where, yes, everybody around me is trying to get to the top, but I like where I'm at right now because I have a flow to it. I have work-life balance where I'm at right now. So I'm content here. Don't let anybody make you feel bad about that. That's beautiful that you've established work-life balance. You have found what you value most and you're advocating for it. But for those who decide to lean in because you want to be a part of the conversation that so many women are cut out of, for those who decide to lean in and break through that glass ceiling, for those who decide to lean in and say, I'm going to do something different to get something different, hang on. You're in for a ride. You're in for a ride that you're capable of, but you're in for a ride. And you're going to learn so much of what you are capable of doing. You're going to learn so much about why you're being tested. You're going to learn so much about yourself, and you're going to learn so much about other people. But all of this comes down to figuring out where you fit in, what works for you. And once again, being unapologetic about that thing that works for you. So asking yourself these questions can help you figure out what works for you, because this gives us a chance to self-reflect. And self-awareness is the foundational element of emotional intelligence, which really just points to, I'm aware at what I am insecure about, and I'm aware at what I'm confident in. I'm aware of where I flourish and I excel, and I'm aware of where I fumble and I flounder. And I'm aware of what I need to do better at, and I'm aware at what I am really, really just wonderful at. So do I consider myself to be confident? If I don't, what knowledge do I need to acquire so that I can start to feel that way? If I do, what do I feel confident at, and how can I get more of that going? Do I see myself as a leader? Maybe there are more things I need to learn, but I also have some qualities that demonstrate I would make an excellent leader once I get more information. Or maybe I have already demonstrated I'm an excellent leader and I just need to release the imposter syndrome and step in and own it. Maybe I need to find out if I trust my instincts. Am I trusting of myself or am I mistrusting of myself? Because if I mistrust me, why would I invite anybody else to follow my lead? Truly, if I don't trust my leadership, if I don't want to follow after what I'm saying and doing, why would I encourage anybody else to? So I got to look at, do I trust my instincts? How about asking, what do I need to do to be more confident? What knowledge, skills, education do I need to acquire so I feel like I can ask for what I know that I'm worth? How and have I set clear goals for myself? How do I go about setting those goals? And are they realistic, or are they at some unrealistic level of perfectionism? Where is my bar set, and is it high enough? What am I willing to advocate for and ask for on my own behalf? Do I speak up? And if I'm not speaking up, why am I not speaking up? Is it because I'm afraid to be seen as difficult? Because if so, I know there are so many women around me who feel that way too. But what could happen if I was willing to speak up, even if I am perceived as difficult? How could I benefit this field? How could I benefit my peers? How could I benefit myself? And what image am I projecting? How do I see myself? Do I see myself as difficult? Do I see myself as troublesome or aggressive? Because if I do, then I'm always going to be trying to protect other people from me. I really have to have an appropriate self-image so that when I go after something and I'm misunderstood, at least I'm not misunderstanding myself. Like, sit with that for a moment. At least you won't be misunderstanding yourself. Other people are going to misread you all the time. It'll happen probably before this day is over again. It happens all the time. But do you feel like you are checked in with yourself enough, self-aware, got yourself on the front burner instead of the back burner so that you know who you are advocating for? So that even if you get a no from someone outside of you, it isn't going to be because you had already told yourself no inside of you. And the majority of the time, we don't give other people outside of us a chance to reject us because we're so busy rejecting ourselves proactively in the forefront. So these are all questions to help you practice greater self-awareness and to really lean into, what do I need to learn? What do I need to appreciate about myself so that I can value me? So key attributes, we want to look at strength and sensitivity. You can be strong and soft. You can be firm and gentle. You can be all of the above. That's the beauty of being a woman. You can be open and you can be collaborative, but you can also be decisive. You can be knowledgeable and you can be unique and you can be innovative. You can actively listen and then be a servant leader where you take what people are telling you and you put yourself empathetically in their shoes and you drive them forward according to what would be best for the team, for the community. You can be enthusiastic and bold and powerful and positive, and you can contribute greatly to your social contributions. You can contribute greatly to your community because this is how we make it. It's not only taking a village to raise a child, it takes a village to take care of a village. It takes us as adults being able to lean on one another, to advocate for one another, to call one another in, and to acknowledge when we are not giving each other our best. We're not making opportunities available for people who have more than proven they deserve it. So these are key attributes to any leader, but these are attributes we want to highlight for you as women leaders so that you feel empowered in your ability to be open, to be sensitive, to be positive, as well as to be decisive, to be firm. All of the above you are capable of. So as we wind down, our recipe for success is go for what you want in your career and don't give up. Even if going for what you want means going on home, because that's where you'd like to go because you're opting out at this point. Doesn't mean you won't opt in later, but do what you need to for you right now. Your needs change regularly, so stay in tune with what your needs are presently. Hone the skills necessary to give yourself opportunities. Work on your communication skills. Work on leadership development. Work on emotional intelligence. You will start to become an even better person as well as professional as you work on each of these. Raise your hand in meetings. Speak up. Speak with clarity. Speak with confidence. Make sure that you honor other people's rights to share their thoughts and opinions too, but make sure you honor your right to share yours. And support and empower other women who are in leadership roles who are aspiring to lead. There's room. I know we get into a scarcity mindset in this day and age, but there's room for us. And if we do it right, we can start to create more spaces for better people to be put in the right positions. So success formula for setbacks and failures, because we are going to fail. And honestly, I highly recommend you fail fast and you fail forward. Fall forward on your face, get on up and keep going. So set realistic expectations for yourself. And when you don't necessarily meet those expectations, analyze why. Relish the obstacles that came up because the obstacles always also hold opportunity, and share them. Even though it's really vulnerable to share when you make a mistake, This is how we learn from one another. This is how we navigate the glass cliff situation. We see what one another have had as obstacles, difficulties, and challenges. And in our willingness to demonstrate what we would like to do better next time, we give one another a leg up. And then we can pull the other person up who we learned from and move on. Once you have realized I made a mistake, I failed there. What did I learn from it? Okay, I got the gem, I got the lesson. I'm going to move forward now, and I'm going to implement what I learned. I'm going to implement that wisdom. And we got to remember our great role models. And this is a completely different list than what we were talking about when we started this conversation together. But look at their words of wisdom to you, recognizing that labels are for filing, labels are for clothing, labels are not for people. Or how about the only real prison is fear, and the only real freedom is freedom from fear? So that imposter syndrome, worried about feeling like people see you difficult, people see you as aggressive. We're afraid of that, but we got to get on the other side of that. How about you may not control all the events that happen to you, but you can decide not to be reduced by them. Or just recognizing that you have a right to find out what works best for you. And upon figuring that out, don't let anyone talk you out of it. Don't let anyone, including you and your anxiety and your insecurity and your imposter syndrome, talk you out of it. Once you set your sights on what feels right for you, be unapologetic at moving towards it. So from this conversation today, I want you to think about, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? Do you want to opt out? Do you want to lean out? Do you want to lean in? Do you want to do somersaults? Do you want to change the game? What do you want to do? So reflect back on the information presented today. And what has been most important for you to learn? What has been most important for you to hear? I'm sure that a lot of this you already know because you're a woman in the profession. And if you are one of our male allies, I hope you take away something that you can instill and encourage and empower the women around you with. But now that you've heard a reminder of these things, because that's really what I'm here to do, is to remind you, how do you want to implement what you've been reminded of? And what is one thing you will do to become a confident and competent leader? One thing. We're not saying to take every slide and write it all down and implement it all this week. No, we're saying to take one thing and to really focus and concentrate on that so that you can get to where you want to be. And with that, I want to thank you all for being present today. I am so grateful to have gotten to have this conversation with you instead of just lecture you. My name is Ra Kalan, and I ask that you go ahead and scan this QR code and give us some feedback over how you experienced today so that we can continue to make these sessions applicable and informative and engaging for you. It means a lot. Your insight is anonymous, so give us the good, the bad, the beautiful, and everything in between. And I look forward to coming back and helping you people more effectively next time. Thank you. You're more than welcome.
Thank you so much, Ra. Just to let everybody know that this session was recorded and we'll be sharing the link. So if you want to reflect back on this at a different time, that will be coming out in a couple of days. Have a great rest of your week.
Bye, y'all. Take care.